two different. There we go. So if you do not want to be filmed, you can turn your camera off and still participate in the discussion, but it is being recorded as of right now, so it can be viewed later for others who couldn't attend at this time. So welcome to the Dayton Youth Action Board panel. It's just a discussion panel where two members of our Youth Action Board are going to be discussing their stories with homelessness and the homelessness system, as well as discussing change that they would like to see as being a part of active members of the Youth Action Board here. So it's an open discussion. We want it to be kind of a conversation. You can ask questions, but I do want to be able to say on behalf of our two members that if they do not want to discuss something or answer a question and it makes them uncomfortable, they have the right to be able to refuse. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Sam and Ariel.
Hi, I'm Sam Webb. I've member since about March of this year. It seems like it's been longer than that. I think it's been since March. But happy to be here. Ariel.
There we go. I had myself double muted. Ariel Newman. I've been a YAB member since last November, I think. Yeah, last November, give or take. Also happy to be here and discuss everything that's going to be discussed.
Okay. If either Sam or Ariel wants to start with discussing either kind of your involvement in the homelessness system, the types of services you had to use, and what got you there, as long as you're comfortable, go ahead.
I can kind of start. In 2020, when the pandemic first started. So the pandemic started in March. I remember the day, on March 15th. I got fired from my job, and I didn't really get fired. He just told us that I worked for a diner, and he told us that he's probably going to close the diner, which he didn't, but and we all had to really just kind of figure it out. And my partner at the time started freaking out because his job was closing as well. And we were just trying to figure it out. My mental health was not the best at that time, so everything was kind of closing in, and we ended up kind of just going through the ringer with everything. And I know as soon as April hit, that's when like everything got pretty bad. I thought me and my partner were gonna move into an apartment together. We got we paid for the apartment application fee. We got our background check done, all that, and we got the money together for the deposit. And I'm literally about to go put in the deposit money, and he said, no, I don't want to do this anymore, and kind of broke up with me as well. And I had already given up my apartment and stopped working with HUD. So I was officially homeless. And then mental health got worse. And then I was in and out of the hospital for about 3 months and was homeless that whole time. And after that, everything got worse, and ended up getting connected with Daybreak. And from there, I started using Daybreak services, lived in I didn't live in the shelter at Daybreak. I actually lived in a hotel. I had a mentor help me out with that. And then I lived at Daybreak for a while and went through their housing program. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
I guess I'll go. Oh God, I think 2018, somewhere in there. I had been staying with my mom, and we had our living situation had not always been the greatest, just because we had two very conflicting living styles per se. She's very very organized lady. Me not so much. So that was always a point of contention growing up, and it got to a point where she was like, I just can't handle this anymore. And she was like, you know what, either you move out and find an apartment, or like you have to be gone, was her thing, is you just can't be here. And so she made me go down, talk to the people at Daybreak, and she was nice enough to let me at least stay in the house until Daybreak had an opening in the shelter, as opposed to just kicking me out blatantly. And so I went through the shelter for 6 to 8 months, I think, somewhere in there. And then I moved up to their like in-building apartments. At this time, I was also trying to deal with college and not having a car. So I was catching the bus back and forth to Daybreak from the university, trying to handle that stuff. I was in the in-building apartments for a while, until basically I was there from 2018, I think, to 2019, because the living situation there wasn't working with how I was conducting myself, with regards to the actual like living conditions. And so Daybreak gave me enough grace to not evict me, on paper. And they were like, hey, we'll give you X amount of time. You just need to be gone by this time. During this whole process, I was trying to find apartments, with the help of Daybreak and my mom. And throughout that whole time, I learned different things about myself, the diagnosis wise, and personally. And just apartment after apartment, either either I had issues with concerns of safety or transportation, because it would be 1 to 2 bus lines. I work across the city, and I would have to be up 3-4 hours before work to get there. And things just weren't lining up. And the end December of 2019 was when I had to be gone from Daybreak, and my mom had enough grace and understanding to let me come back. And I've luckily been here since. I've been able to make a lot of personal improvements to make this situation work a lot better than it did in the past. She also made some personal growth, and we worked together with family therapist and meant the therapist on her own, and it's things are better than they were, that's for sure. And I'm very happy about that. But yeah.
Thank you both for sharing your stories. Both of your stories are very diverse, and it shows that there's not one reason why someone could be homeless and that it can happen to anyone. If you two would not mind, you did mention briefly the types of services that you used, but because your stories are so different, I was wondering if you could delve into the types of services that you used for your situations and how they were helpful to you. Whoever would like to go first.
I can go ahead and go first. Because I came in with a lot of services and like stuff already established in my life, for a while I didn't use Daybreak for anything other than housing, because I had a community therapist, I had a job, I was in school. So for a long time, all I really used Daybreak for was a place to sleep. And eventually things didn't go the greatest with my job at the time. It was just becoming more and more of an issue, like stuff at work. So I ended up leaving my job and working with the Opportunity House, I think is what they're called, the 701 building. Yeah. Yeah, the employment center, whatever their label was at the time. And I worked with my person there, for a job coach, I think, for a while, to try and find a job that was suitable. And I also ended up leaving school because it was just, everything was becoming too much. And so I was like, you know what, I'll take a break from school, get everything situated, and then go back. So after working with my job coach, I ended up working at Lindy's, and kind of stayed there. I think I started doing like little temporary shift stuff that they had, and then ended up getting like hired on as like a Lindy's employee, and was pretty much there until COVID. And not Miss Sam, but one of the gentlemen that works in there, he had a guy he was talking to that needed an employee, and it just happened to be a comic book store, and he was like, I know you do cards and whatnot, this seems right up your alley. And he took me, we met over there to meet with the guy, and that's where I still work. And so and then I ended up using not the psychiatrist, but like their Daybreak's regular therapy services after a while, because getting to and from my community therapist was just becoming a lot. So I ended up just kind of doing everything in-house. But yeah, that's I know Daybreak offered a bunch of other stuff, but those are the only ones I really utilized.
I utilize like the housing, I utilize case management. I'm about to transition out of Daybreak here soon, so I barely see my case manager now. What else? I never really used the employment specialist because my employment specialist, I never talked to her. Like, we could never meet. It's like we were on two different planets. We could never really coordinate. I used, let's see, I used a lot of, I use the therapeutic services now. I'm about to finish my second set of um, therapy. Um, and I think that's all the services that I use through Daybreak. Um, as Ariel mentioned, I had a lot of community providers already. I had my own therapist, my own psychiatrist. I I had my own case manager, but he wasn't that great. So they provided a case manager, and she's phenomenal. She's a really good case manager. Um, I used a lot of services outside of Daybreak, though. I met with ODJFS a lot to try to work with for employment. I worked with CareSource a lot for employment and different, especially after all of my time of being in the hospital. They did a lot of like after care for that, making sure I was going to appointments and things like that. Um, I used a lot of um, time with my actual psychiatrist and therapist, and going through the different, that was a time. That was a time. So going through that was a lot, but um, yeah, those are some of the services that I use. And now, like, I don't really have as many needs, so I don't use as many services. Like I said, I don't really see my case manager as often. Um, I know I have to keep a case manager to keep my housing, but yeah.
Thank you very much. I believe we had a question. So if you would like to go ahead and unmute and ask your question, please feel free.
Thanks, Kennedy, and thanks, Sam and Ariel, for sharing. I do have a question. In listening to both of you, it was sort of clear about this combination of services, which I think is great, that there were services in the homeless system and services in the community, because certainly no one can do it by themselves, and also have a sense of some of the things that you thought did work. I was struck in particular, Ariel, by some of your comments that seem to reflect this sense of, well, like, what could you have done differently or what? And certainly we all have personal responsibility, but this sense of like, and then Daybreak was like, okay, well, we're done. You have to leave by this time. It's not really kind of working out. And so there are, in thinking from where I sit at the system about the need for all of our programs and services to be responsive to people with a variety of different needs, behaviors, ideas, all sorts of things, and not just what we think of as might be an ideal participant. I'd like to hear from both of you some sense of what is something that you think should have been different, could be different, would be beneficial, either within Daybreak or within the community or in a connection, that would have made it better, that would have either helped you feel more stable, more connected, better able to do what you needed and wanted to do, so that we can be thinking about where should we be making changes in the system, because that's how we learn, is from people who've experienced our system, and where you may say, yep, this was good, all right, great, but you know what, this really wasn't. And so I'm wondering if either you have any thoughts about something that could have been different or better that would be helpful.
Ariel, you go first.
I don't really know if I'm gonna be like completely honest with you. Because like other than just being aware of like the full scope of services that are available for people in different demographics in the community, that's literally the only thing I can think of, because the thing with my housing situation was I wasn't in a, how do I put this? I want to make sure I phrase this right.
Like crisis.
Not necessarily, and that's the thing. But because it wasn't to that degree. It was more, I didn't have a full understanding of some of the mental health stuff I had going on and what I needed to make sure everything worked, because at the time I was working like 32 to 35 hours a week. I was very burnt out by the time I got home. So that, along with my already existing issues, wasn't creating a very clean or healthy living space. And that's why Daybreak was like, we can't have you here. This isn't good. We can't let you do this. And there wasn't, like, they did the best they could. I'll be honest with you. Like they, what's the job title? Case aides. Like they had me meet with like a case aide every day or like every other day to try and get through everything and be like, okay, we're gonna do this task today. Because they really did the best that they could probably, to try and make it work. Because like they didn't even push. I was in the building much longer than I should have been, because like the timeline that they have set up, I should have been out in a community apartment, but everybody knew, and I wasn't very comfortable with it to begin with, but they were like, yeah, this isn't going to work out if we did shove you out there. Things would probably be way worse. So they did what they could, and it was also me just not understanding. It was a multifaceted issue. So I don't blame Daybreak for what they did, because they, like I said, they did what they could. So I hold no animosity or anything like that. Because if it didn't happen, I wouldn't be where I am now. So other than just being more aware of community services, because like my mom connected me to some stuff to try and get me help, that Daybreak, at least my case manager, may not have been aware of or didn't seem to be aware of until we brought it up to her. And she was like, oh, okay, cool. Obviously that stuff didn't work out for various reasons, but it would just, that's my biggest thing, is just maybe making the case managers and other people more aware of what all is out there, to help, to at least be able to the best of their ability, help the clients that they have.
For me, I didn't like, when in my time at Daybreak, I realized that like I was an adult, and like I was like a fully established adult, and like some of the workers at Daybreak would be like, do you work here? And I'm like, no. And a lot of the time it would get a little bit hard for me to kind of function at Daybreak, because not everything is allowed. Like I cook every day, and it wasn't set up for a person that cooks every day. It's not set up for that. It's not set up for a person who goes to the grocery store, and it's not set up for any of that, which is fine. Like it's not really for the age demographic it is. That's not really what you should really be doing at that time, to be honest. And I realized that like it was very hard for me to kind of manage in Daybreak because I had already had a couple apartments on my own. I had already done that before. And it was very hard for me to transition into being kind of under, I don't know how to say it, like strict rules, I guess. I didn't find it that they were being harsh on people or anything like that. But I found it hard for me to kind of function in Daybreak because I didn't know how to be a regular 22-year-old. Does that make sense? I was kind of like already established, and to kind of like knock myself back down to like unestablished ways was very, very hard. And also like I had just went through psychosis for the first time, and they really didn't understand what I was going through. And I had to I didn't know what I was going through. And I didn't want to like make anyone uncomfortable ever. So I stayed in my room a lot. I didn't really socialize a lot. And it was concerning to a lot of the staff, but I couldn't help it because I didn't really know how to explain to the other residents or the staff what was really going on. So in part, I wish that there was maybe a little bit more easier ways to communicate things. Like I wish I could have just shown them my file from the hospital, if that makes sense. Like here's what she's been through. Here's all of the paperwork. Here's all of the medications. Here's all of the blah, blah, blah that she's been going through. And I wish that it was easier because they always say like, I even hear it now, like sometimes there are people that are kind of too much of an adult to be a Daybreak. And it kind of stinks because you're like, I still need the help. I still need these benefits. I still need these resources because they kind of saw me as very capable. So they would ask if for different things. So yeah.
Thank you both. I know it's a tough question. I feel I was kind of putting you on the spot in the sense of, but just thinking about, it's just always useful for those of us who are particularly in the system to be listening or thinking with you and hearing from you what also could have been helpful. And I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus either, or any individual provider under the bus, but just in trying to understand the experience. I think that is the power of having a youth action board, having you on panels like this, at the policy board, whatever these different, settings are to help us learn so that we can make changes, put new things in place, make better connections for the next person, so that things are better. Because while you each had unique stories, there are some things that, you're not the only person who's been in either one of those situations or who will be. And so we want to make sure that we're, continuing to all think about this together so that it is better.
Thank you both for sharing, and thank you for that wonderful question. I saw that someone else had their hand raised. If that person still has a question and would like to unmute and ask, please go ahead.
Thank you, Kennedy. That was me. And first, I want to thank both Sam and Ariel for sharing those answers. They were very vulnerable answers and also helped me come up with this next question. So with both of your unique circumstances, I heard a couple things. I heard Ariel mention that there was a timeline there that people had to meet in order to move through the system. And I also heard, Sam, you mentioned the ways that there are some adults that may have different life skills, may know how to cook already, things of those natures. This is kind of maybe building on Kathleen's question, but I was wondering, are there things that could have been useful? So not to lead, but maybe a less stringent timeline for you, Ariel, or maybe a different living space for you, Sam. I'm just trying to gauge what would be helpful for someone in your situations.
I think it was just weird. It was weird for me to I don't think I needed a different living space. I feel like after I kind of broke out of my shell a little bit, after being so to myself for so many months, I tried to do a little bit more with the community area of Daybreak. I do wish there was a little bit more, I guess, recognition of having those skills. They had a life skills coach that I really enjoyed, Miss Chanel, and she was really, we had to do the life skills thing to kind of get our furniture for our apartments. And she would always say, like, you're on it. You know these things so well. I don't have to teach you how to do these things. And it was what I thought was a little bit difficult though was once I got my apartment, we had to do these weekly inspections, and it was so hard because, like, as a person, I have such a chaotic like day ahead of me most of the days, and every single week having to make sure that your house is tip top pristine, making sure everything's up to par. It's kind of hard when you just got here, you're not even fully unpacked. And I would like a way to kind of show that I could, have those skills and maybe, use my skills in a different way or things like that. But yeah, I wish that I could help other people, if that makes sense too, because there was a lot of the other people in the shelter and things like that that really didn't know a lot of the resources that were out there, didn't really know how to cook, didn't know how to organize things. And, I really wish I could help. So I think somebody, you just literally said it in the chat, like, Keisha, like peer support and things like that. I wish that there was more engagement in between clients, because that would have helped me a lot.
I'm sorry, I was so zoned in. What was the question? I'm so sorry.
Oh, you're completely fine. So I was wondering about, so I realized at the end of my question that I was building on Kathleen's question, but I had a question about just considering your individual circumstances. I did hear you mention a few things, Ariel, specifically about access to resources, which was really cool because it reminded me of a form of diversion almost. If we could equip families with more access to resources, then maybe children wouldn't have to, or youth rather, excuse me, wouldn't have to go into the system because they may be able to get that support at home. I also heard you mention the timeline, that some people were moving through the timeline quicker than others. And so I was wondering, did that timeline create like any pressure for you? Was it helpful? Was there something that could have been done there that would have made you more successful?
The timeline seemed reasonable to me, at least, like in the grand scheme, like, okay, we get you through here by roughly X amount of time. And then we get you through here to establish life skills so that you're successful and know what you're doing and how to handle yourself once you're out in the community. And then you're in the community for this amount of time with support. And then you either stay there or you go to the HUD or wherever else. And then you are a person in the community. So it was a reasonable amount of time. I will say that, at least to me. It seemed like a solid and well thought out plan. But the second part of your question was about resources, right?
Yeah, just
Okay.
wondering if there was something better that could have been done in your individual case, because what I hear from both of you saying is your situations were different, but it feels like a cookie cutter almost, not to take away from them because they can only do as much work as they can do. But I just was wondering if there was anything else that could be done to help people individually.
I think it's just being more aware. And part of it is, because I was talking to my mom about this, I understand the restriction, but the restriction of some resources being, you have to be homeless, otherwise we can't help you with anything, or you can't utilize our service at all. And I think that part makes it hard to, it's like, oh, well, I have to go live in a shelter somewhere in order to be able to come to you guys. That seems a little, I don't want to say it seems a little silly, but it kind of does, that you have to be basically in crisis in order to use something that if you had access to it, then it would make your current situation a little better. Like, I don't know if that would involve having a offshoot of whatever, like, oh, here's the organization and here's our standard outreach or something. I don't know. But just making certain services fully accessible, as opposed to needing to be in a housing crisis. Because I don't even know. But like, I got connected with places once I left Daybreak. And the only reason I got connected to places was because I was leaving Daybreak. Now I'm not fully aware of how places works, but that was my understanding. Is I was able to utilize places because I was coming from a housing program or like a homelessness, whatever. And like, that's why I had access to, what is it? Key Terrace, I think is the building. Like they're a place that is long-term housing for those with disabilities. You have to be in the homelessness system in order to be able to access that. So stuff like that, like it's I understand why, but in some aspects it seems like it's shutting out a lot of people from resources they could potentially use.
I also, if you don't mind, I just wanted to tag in on the end of that because you made a very good point, Ariel. It does feel as though you got to be in the know to know the know. Because I didn't really know how difficult case management was beyond actually being in the homeless system. I tried to get a case manager before I got into Daybreak to help me with housing, and it was very, very difficult. I went through 3 within like a 2-month time span just because they just weren't as capable, um, not very personable, any of that. I had to do a lot of the work on my own. So, and you get a case manager to kind of help you with those types of things. Um, and it's almost like if you don't get a case manager that is a housing case manager, you really won't have any help. Um, if you don't come from being in the homeless system, you really don't have a lot of help in this system. You kind of have to guide yourself through it. Um, and it's very, very difficult doing that on your own. I was trying to do it on my own and it was not working. I spent all of the end of 2020, really struggling and trying to get things back to normal, and it just was not happening. So I had to, get myself in the system. So I think that if there could be, we talk about, people going out into the community and help finding people to get into the system. I wish there was something there previous. I wish there was a kind of no border kind of system set up that kind of is just available to everyone to get resources, or even if it's getting them into the system, that's a little bit quicker than having to wait for months and couch surf and things like that. Yeah.
Thank you both for those in-depth answers, and thank you, Lakeisha, for the wonderful question. I saw something from Aubrey in the chat. Madison YAB members have done what they call freedom dreaming sessions. I think they ask themselves a question like, quote, what would it have looked like and felt like if I'd been able to live and thrive as I wanted to when I hit a crisis, end quote. Wondering if that framing resonates as a question for y'all. So you can pull up the chat and reread that if you need to, but how do you guys feel about freedom dreaming sessions and that framing of that question?
When I hit crisis, I feel like when I hit crisis, I knew that there was gonna be, I'd already kind of like hit a couple of valleys, in my life before I went through homelessness. And I knew that this was going to be something that was going to take a lot out of me. And if I could have lived how I wanted, I would have moved across the country and changed my name and started over. But that's not really, feasible for, just a regular person for who, doesn't have all $1 million or anything. But I know that if I could have really done what I wanted, I just would have gotten my, voucher back and just gotten myself an apartment and tried to just live comfortably as I could on my own. I didn't really want to go through the homeless system. I really didn't. Um, it really is difficult because it's a lot of running around. It's a lot of even getting to the point I'm at now was so stressful because, we had to, me and my case manager put in so many applications just to get told no over and over and over. So you got to deal with that rejection. And then, you have to wait to see what subsidy will take you. And you have to give out so much information and put in so many applications and pay for the application fees. And it's just, I really just wanted to get an apartment, get in there, and just kind of live comfortably. But now I have all these people I have to answer to a lot of the time. And if I could have, I just wouldn't have so much red tape. That's what I think about a lot, is not having so much, so many people to answer to and call. I still I get waken up by a phone call every day, whether that be, a job search or, something or another about my healthcare or anything like that. Just trying to get things figured out. So, that question does resonate because I really do wish that I could have done things differently, and not had to enter the system. But it has helped me greatly. But it is a lot of work.
Ariel, would you like to say anything?
I really don't know if I have an answer, if I'm going to be honest with you.
That's okay. Okay. So in the last 5 or so minutes, I was wondering if either you would like to address the kinds of things that you want to see moving forward as members of the app. What do you want to have an impact on? What do you want to work on? What would you like to do? Just anything that you would like to see, anything you would like to create, things like that.
I want like 9 or 10 different day breaks. There needs to be youth housing everywhere. There is so much, senior housing, so much, there's no there's not a lot of disability housing. There's not a lot of group homes. There's not in Dayton, I don't see a lot of that. Or it's very under wraps. Like, again, you have to be in the system to know the system. I'd like to see a lot of progression in the systems that we do have in play, understanding what youth go through, understanding that youth values and principles are different from the adult ways. I think it's very necessary that we have spaces for youth that are open and very clear, and we're in a high demand. Yesterday in the core team meeting, Brian from St. Vincent said that they've had about 45 people enter, and 18 to 19 of them were youth. And that number is just going to keep rising as the winter goes on. And there needs to be a space for that the youth. It's very crucial that we create a space for the youth, because this is going to be who we see, in the future making a lot of the change happen. And if we can't support them, then, what are we really doing? So I would just like to, open up the space more for youth and youth families to have a safe space and have homes just like everyone else.
Yeah, I can, Sam, with regards to your note about the large amount of senior housing. I know with some of it, it's zoning, where people, if they know what kind of housing is going to be put in, they can be like, no, we don't want that here. And then you then have to go find somewhere else that will let you build. But it's zoning stuff, and then there's another aspect to it. But that's why there's a larger amount of like senior housing than HUD housing or disability housing. But to my knowledge, at least, that could be different for different areas. But yeah, like Sam said, more youth specific disability housing, as well as youth services in general, and in different parts of the county, because having one place, Daybreak, being downtown, if someone is in like Trotwood or somewhere very far north, or like basically on the very edges of the county, depending on where they are, they may not be able to access Daybreak altogether, because of transportation, due to location. And then just people being aware of what is out there, both for personal use, and community, like system, not system, but I'm going to say company to company, even though that's not technically the right word, but company to company use. Just so if a provider is somewhere and they're like, oh, you need X, I know the place to go, and then they can connect the person to that service, because they're now more aware of what services are available.
Okay. I would like to open it up for any last minute questions. If there are none, I will go ahead and ask our two YAB members for any final comments that they would like to give. And then we will go ahead and wrap up this panel.
Appreciate you all coming. Realize I was on mute. Appreciate you all coming, and it's good seeing everyone today. Thanks for participating.
Same, thank you for coming and all your questions and whatnot.
I just wanted to say how much I've enjoyed this past hour, and I really appreciate you both sharing so many impactful things. This has been one of the best Zoom webinars discussions that I've had in a while, so I appreciate it. Thank you both.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. We really appreciate it. And thank you so much to our two YAP members for being so open and answering honestly and discussing these things with us. And that is the end of the panel. So again, just thank you so much. I hope you learned some things and got some information, and we will see you around. Thank you.